Let's dive on in. So what's the main idea of the book of Deuteronomy? So unlike the unconditional covenant made with Abraham, the covenant between Yahweh and the Israelites was kind of bilateral. It was like a two-way street. God would keep his promise to the people if they remained faithful to God. Because you see, at this time, the adult Israelites were too young whenever Moses made the first covenant at Mount Sinai. So we're kind of a generation removed now. So now Moses urged the people to recommit themselves to Yahweh at the doorstep of the promised land. As we know, Moses never actually made it to the promised land, but he kind of led them up into that point. So Moses, being close to the promised land, he kind of just re-urged the new generation to re-covenant or recommit themselves to the Lord and follow up under his teachings. And that's pretty much the main idea of Deuteronomy. For our animal spotlight of today, we have a bird that's kind of got a little funny name. It's called the Tufted Titmouse. Funny name, but it's because they get that with a little tuft that sits on top of their head. The last part of the name, well, I haven't figured that one out exactly why they name it that. Very common in the South. Here in Florida, they can be found everywhere except in the Everglades or the Miami area. Once you really get south of Orlando, you rarely find them. They have begun to expand into the northern states like Maine, New York, Michigan. They are common and widespread in mature forests. They are typically in pairs or small groups. They feed on insects and seeds commonly found at bird feeders. So for our financial portion today, we're going to be talking about emergency funds. So an emergency fund is basically just an amount of money set aside for an emergency, like the name implies. So you just put away, I like to think of either 6 months salary, a year salary. If you don't have a salary, then the amount of money that'll keep you alive for 6 months or a year. Just kind of like a good little safety net that if something were to happen, if you can't work or your kid has to go to surgery or you have to go to surgery, you have a good amount of money that even if you just have to sit at the house, you're still able to live based on that emergency fund you have. These are good to be set up in savings accounts, checking account, anywhere you can just keep your money where you have it when you need it. Now, I highly recommend you set up your emergency account before you do any kind of investing, stocks, anything. Get out of debt first, build your emergency fund, then you can start venturing into all the different type of investments. But protect yourself first. So our history spotlight today, we're going to be talking about the famous Aztecs. Now, the Aztecs were found in the Mexico, Central America region, very similar area to the Mayans. They actually preceded the Mayans. They came afterwards. And it says the Aztecs built their capital in a swampy island in the middle of the lake Texaco, which is what is now modern-day Mexico City. So the Aztecs were literally just walking around the forest looking for somewhere to set up, and it was this ancient prophecy from the gods that they believed that if they saw an eagle perched on a cactus, that was supposed to be their spot. They saw this, and they said, hey, that's our spot right there. The Aztecs conquered nearby lands and created an empire stretching from the Gulf of Mexico to the Pacific Ocean. The Aztecs faithfully sacrificed humans for the sun god, so the Aztecs believed in sacrificing humans. So the Aztecs actually made this process easier because instead of using their own people as sacrifices, they got the bright idea to let's start using people from other tribes as sacrifices. This actually caused all the tribes around, as I can imagine, to hate the Aztecs, and this led to a lot of war and a lot of conflict. So in 1519, the Spanish conquistador Herman Cortez arrived, and he actually helped fight the Aztecs with the surrounding groups that hated the Aztecs. So they all kind of teamed up and fought the Aztecs. By 1521, which is only 3 years, the battles and the diseases the Spanish had brought made it hard to keep fighting. And so the Aztec emperor actually surrendered, and the Spanish built Mexico City over their city. So now that's what we have commonly nowadays as Mexico City. That's why it got its name. Was formed from Cortez, the Spanish conquistador. So I hope you learned something there about the Aztecs and kind of how we get some of the modern names we have. And our inspiring quote of the day is, "Nothing is impossible. The word itself says, I'm possible." And that is by Aubrey Hepburn. Hope you learned something today. Have a good one.